welcome to My Baking Journey, a podcast for bakers where you get to hear from some of the great minds in the baking industry. My name is Haf.
And my name is Rachel. I'm a baker. I know what it's like to be baking all day alone in my kitchen, experiencing the frustrations and struggles with no one else to guide or support me through it.
And I'm not a baker, but I've witnessed all the ups and downs that come with this industry and where it's hard to get a little bit of extra help.
So if you're looking for advice, tips, and amazing insight from various experienced bakers, you've come to the right place.
So let's give you a little insight into what's in store for you this week.
I was very time poor as well. I had 3 little kids and I had to bang something out in my limited kitchen and my space. Knowing my limitations and my boundaries helped me define what I wasn't going to make, which then helped me hone in on what I was able to make. It is really difficult to find those boundaries when you want to invest all of your time into your business. Half of me was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But the other half of me was like, what? You've sabotaged my trip, my romantic trip to Paris by myself.
Hey everyone, listen, the person you're about to hear from in this episode is where Rachel really found the start of her cake inspiration journey. I'm talking about Jenne from Posh Little Cakes in Perth, Australia. For many of you bakers, your baking career is maybe your second career. You've given up the corporate day job for one of many reasons and moved into baking. Jenne did just that. This is a story about making that sacrifice of a life as a high-flying executive at a large multinational, kid-free, traveling the world, but then all that changed when she had to quit. It took lots of determination, grit, and perseverance to build the cake business and school she has today. It's safe to say that making that transition was hugely difficult for an ambitious female where her world was turned upside down. But to hear the story of how she made it happen is just amazing. You'll also hear a bit about Rachel and I in this episode. And we start off talking about cake stands of all things. Oh, and excuse the dog barking. Hey, what can I say? This is us. This is real life, and we're just happy you're tuning in to hear the journey. We really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. So let's crack on with Jenne from Posh Little Cakes. Do you have a coffee, water, anything like that you need?
I might get a cup of water.
Go for it, no problem. I recognise the ones on the top, the gold ones, the rose gold ones. You see?
I think the Amalfi something stands.
Yeah.
I remember. Is it Amalfi? I remember seeing them in Australia.
They don't make these anymore. I don't know.
Oh.
They were a little bit weird. At first, I had a really good... they sent me a whole bunch of stands and I thought, oh, that's lovely. And I thought I'd be able to plug and do some work with them. And then I reached out to them officially. I said, look, I'd be more than happy to collaborate or, work with you. And, if you want to... I have sort of now enough of a following where I can ask for paid posts and I do that with my vanilla supplier. She gives me product and I pay. I sort of give her some free promotion on my page only because I only promote the products that I actually use. I'm very picky with who I collaborate with. So I reached out and said, officially we could work something out because I really do love your products. And then blank space. So I was like, oh, and I did contact them and I said, oh, I'd like to do something. They come out of the eastern states and that you have to ship and I was doing it on a consignment basis and I was happy to sell for them. But yeah, he didn't pursue it. So I wasn't sure what was going on. So I sort of left it. But yeah, that was an opportunity missed because I really do like their product and it's in all of my cake shops.
Yeah, I think when they came out, there was very few nice cake stands on the market.
Yeah.
So they really had I remember meeting the owner at the Brisbane Cake Show.
Did you?
Oh, you did?
Yeah. He was an older chap. But yeah, I always loved their cake stands. They were a little bit pricey to buy. You had to go for an investment. But yeah.
But people would buy it because it's like it's a furniture piece or like an item in your kitchen that you'll use every time you have a cake to display.
It's a classic look, and you can use it over and over and over again, and it doesn't get tiring, right?
Elegant.
Yeah. You don't need to put that in.
No, that's okay. I quite like that we just sort of ran in with it. I can interject just a big thank you, Jenny, for being on our podcast, because Rachel was doing a bit of research on you. Obviously, there's a bit of history that she's mentioned to you previously in terms of how you inspired her, and she'll tell you more about that. But there is a lot that we have in common as a husband and wife team, and then with you and your husband, because we've both spent the greater part of a decade in the same country. I don't know if there was some overlap, but we've both lived in Singapore for more than 10 years.
Wow.
We've both met our partners in Singapore as well.
Fantastic.
Our kids were born there. I don't know if your kids were born there or in Australia.
Yes.
Well, there you go. So I find this fascinating.
Wow.
That,
we could have done something back then.
So tell us, what years were your corporate career, that ended basically
Yes.
there, right, for BHP?
Yeah.
What years were you there up until?
So we were there until 2005, 2004.
Right, okay. Few years before we got there. I got there from 2008 from Melbourne, and Rach had got up from Sydney, I think 2008 too, right, before me.
So we were there 2004
Yes.
till 14.
Okay.
Oh, gosh. I have just miscalculated that grossly.
That's all right.
2004, I was there for 10 years.
Okay.
2004 to 14.
Okay.
And then we came to Australia 2015-ish.
Did you get moved as part of your job?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. I was working for a mining company based in Perth.
Yes.
And it was an international, multinational company, and we based a marketing hub in Singapore. So then I moved with the company. At that time, childless, corporate-minded, ambitious young lady who wanted to see the world and travel and get out of Perth. So
amazing.
I followed the company to Singapore and was based there for 10 years in a marketing, business-to-business marketing role with the company, and they gave me lots of opportunity to travel and learn about all the industries in marketing, still in marketing, but I guess not in the retail or advertising space. This was purely business-to-business marketing, supply chain management, logistics management, capacity supply chain and technical marketing, a lot of things like that, which I guess is still the fun and the sexy part of any business, but still for me, my creative flair was really much hidden in all those years of my corporate life. And so even though I always baked in Singapore and, being in a humid country 364 5 days in a year, you had to figure out how to bake things without it melting and stable. Anyway, I did all of that on the weekends as a hobby baker, baking for colleagues, baking for friends' parties. And it sort of was always there in my whole life. Just sort of kept up my skill sets and learned from my own mistakes pretty much those early years. Little did I know that I was going to be married with 3 children under the age of 2 in Singapore, and then that just took me straight out of corporate life. I had motherhood now being my full-time job. And so with, my husband and I really discussed how we would go sort of move ahead and with a small family, and how is it going to work with both of us working or one of us working? Could we afford for one of us not to work? And it came down to the fact that I was going to sacrifice my career, which is a very common theme in day motherhood these days. I sacrificed my career at that point to raise the children, and soon after, I think they were about 2, the twins were 2 and Juliet was 7 months old, we came back to Perth because my parents were here, the schooling and everything was set up here. So we found that coming back to Australia at that point was the right thing for us. And it was a very big decision, but the best one for us. So we came back to Perth, and I was still in that situation of, oh my goodness, I've just left an amazing career. as fruitful and as rewarding motherhood was, that was just not enough for me. I just needed to find my purpose again. And in that time where I was pretty much homebound, and because I've always had baking as one of my therapeutic outlets that I managed to still find joy in during the time I was looking after the children. So I started looking around the local councils here and seeing how a home business would work, a home baking business would work. And soon enough, I realised it was actually not as hard as I thought it was going to be. And I set it up as a home registered kitchen, and everything sort of started from that moment in a way. To be really honest, at that point, I was still unsure whether this is going to be something fruitful and worthwhile pursuing, but I didn't really have a choice at that point. And I felt, let's just try, let's just take baby steps and go forward one step at a time. And lo and behold, my cake started picking up. And at that point, Instagram was a very critical strategy of mine. It wasn't conscious, but I just knew that was a platform. It was free. I didn't even invest in a website at that point or even a logo for that matter. So I started with Instagram as a really amazing app for portraying all of my portfolio of cakes. So I started taking photos, and I dallied in a lot of photography that was on just off my phone. I didn't even have a proper camera, and I still don't actually. I do a lot of my photographies from my iPhone, and just started baking and taking lots of photos, because I knew the more I posted pictures, and they may not have been for clients, I think. At the beginning, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to try and look like I'm a busy baker. So I started just baking like a mad woman, and it looks, every time I took a photo, I was like, wow, that looks like a finished product, and some person's going to like that. And eventually my intuition was right, and people started believing that I was baking a lot. And I just started sort of selling on, and people were inquiring directly, and that's how I started the little business from my home kitchen.
Do you know, I think it's worth for the listeners, Rachel, you can talk about this more obviously, because putting it into context for what it means for you as a female with a successful career in Singapore, having help in your home to help with your children is a very common thing. Your career opportunities in Singapore are much greater than what you typically would find back home, because there's a smaller talent pool at the level that you're playing at.
Yeah.
So you're not only giving up the fact that you have all this additional help at home with raising the young children, you're also giving up this even larger career opportunity ahead of you because of where you are and the timing and where you're working. You know that you could just continue and the sky's the limit, right, on what you could do. So I just think it's quite interesting to say that when you gave that up, it's a much bigger deal than just saying, I kind of just gave that up and moved back, right?
Yeah, you've touched a very critical point in my life. If I really think back and go through all the emotions that I went through, there was a lot of resentment that I had to process. I'm not saying that in a very negative way. It was more, I guess, a phase in my life that I had to go through to get to where I am today, where I look back now and I was like, wow, I'm so glad I am where I am today, because what my past career I learned from has set me up to be a very successful, economical, efficiently run small business today. So I look at my first career almost as now I do, as having set up myself and my experience to run a successful home business in my little baking studio in Perth and make decent money and not think about look for part-time work in corporate. Or I've surpassed that, and my creativity and my job satisfaction in what I do today is 10 times more than what I would have experienced in the corporate world. So there was a process for me to now acknowledge that. But in that time, when I was looking at oh my goodness, I'm giving up 10 years of my dedicated work in this company. The world was my oyster at that point. I could have gone from there and internationally. But at the same time, we were also very, very much wanting a family, and that also didn't come easily for us in our history of having the kids and in such a short period of time. So there was something that I really also wanted equally as much as my career. So that was a difficult decision, which I don't know if my husband would really understand, because he's never had to give it up, whereas I have, like, pretty much from one day to another, I had to give that up. And in the mindset that I was in, I had twins, actually. I'm not sure if you know that. I had twins first up. So the mindset was I probably needed a lot of therapy afterwards, but I realized that baking was my therapy and what got me through a lot of those tired nights and days, and that need to create, that need to make something with my hands and sell that and see the joy in my client's face. I was telling my husband that the $1 equivalency being earned in my small business today has such a different value to the $1 I earned as a salary in a corporate environment.
I can fully relate here to everything that you're saying. I had a very successful career, and I decided after I had my second child, about 6 months, I'd been back at work. I just thought, I can't juggle all of this. There's travel, there's my husband has travel, there's a lot of expectation. I was working for a very well-known tech company, and I just thought, I'm failing at every single angle. I'm failing at my job, I'm failing as a mother, I'm failing as a wife, as a friend. Everything felt like I couldn't deliver the excellence that everyone deserved. And I remember when I made that decision, and it didn't come lightly. I remember I had many, many evenings of tears, of breakdown. And
I hear you.
and I remember I quit my job and I said I was just going to go off and bake. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just remember saying I'm going to bake. And I had seen your beautiful Instagram page, and honestly, the cakes that you were making were like cakes I have never, ever seen. My mum, when I was little, used to make these beautiful wedding cakes, intricate royal icing, and used to make beautiful birthday cakes. So the expectation of when I had a child, I was like, I need to make these types of cakes. And you look on Instagram, you start getting ideas. And then I found that your page, and I just remember thinking, I've never seen like beautiful stacked cakes with buttercream, and not just ordinary buttercream, it's like Swiss meringue or buttercream.
Yes.
With these beautiful macarons and pipe swirls and pastel colours and designs. And honestly, after I quit my job, I was just obsessed with your page and making sure that the content you were producing was pushing me on those days where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Am I just taking a month off, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months? So I swapped my obsession with work for an obsession with baking.
Oh, God.
And, just mastering and using you as one of the, I think, the main influences on my cake journey, just to keep going and keep pushing. And that. So I don't know whether you realised that at the time. And at the time for me was that I remember going, if I get my cakes just like Posh Little Cakes, I've achieved something.
Oh, amazing. I even had a hard time. So when I started meeting other women at different forums, and I didn't realise it was I've become such an inspiration to so many bakers, and that just makes me really, really humbled. I'm really grateful for your feedback and your personal experience.
I honestly know that I'm not alone. I know there are like thousands upon bakers who have been inspired by your cakes, because, and this is what I want to get into as well, is because the design of your cakes, in my mind, was really, really unique around that time. For me, it was around 2018. I know you started a bit earlier.
Yeah.
But it was so unique. And I wanted to ask you, where did that inspiration come from? Because I think many of us have just replicated tall cakes and designs. And I think there was a few Australian bakers at the time who were doing something similar that I was following.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you about that inspiration, like where it came from.
Like yourself, I mean, I didn't know what kind of cake design I would end up creating. When I first started out, I was also researching a lot. And I pretty much soon understood that I have limitations. I have limitations in my kitchen, in my know-how, in my buttercream, in my caking, and my abilities at that time. So even if I saw something I really loved, I just knew I needed to come up with my own sort of genuine style to be able to proudly say, this is my original design. And there were so many other bakers at that time, especially with Instagram, where you could see the copies were happening. They weren't being tagged and referenced and credited. The original designers weren't. And I didn't really like doing that as well. So for me, my design sort of came quite organically because, one, I was very time poor as well. I had 3 little kids and I had to bang something out in my limited kitchen and my space. And at that time, I didn't even build this studio. This studio, which I'll sort of show you quickly later, was just built over the last 6 months. And before that, I was doing everything from my home kitchen. So as you can imagine, that was just chaos day in and day out. So I had to really come up with something that I liked to make. I was happy to post on my feed, and soon enough, everything you see is what I like. I love the pastels. I love the really simple designs as well as the really pretty whimsy ones that I have created. As I figured out I could only do a certain amount of decoration. So I make all my macarons in-house. I make my meringues in-house. And I used what I could, but with different colour palettes. I didn't try and create every different design that was out there. Honed in on the styles that I liked and pretty much sort of educated, I guess, my clientele that these are the cakes that I like to make. If you like it, you come to me. But if you come to me with another baker's design and ask me to create it, I won't do that for you because that's not my design. I won't make it the same as that picture. So you will need to contact the original designer. So there was a lot of, I guess, education as well from the clientele that were reaching out to me to order cakes as to what I was capable of doing. And I'd be very upfront saying, I can't do this cake. I don't do fondant. I don't do American buttercream. So, I would then put them onto the other bakers that I knew in the industry to contact. But, I guess knowing my limitations and my boundaries helped me define what I wasn't going to make, which then helped me hone in on what I was able to make, what I liked to make. So I guess if one thing that I would impart on new bakers coming into the industry is bake what you like, and soon the clientele will come and find you. So if you are true to your product and true to your design, people see that. People see 100 cakes a day in these feeds, and they pretty much will know if you've copied someone else or copied a different style. So just try and develop it organically.
Yeah, and it's almost having the confidence as well, Jenny, because you were time poor. It actually forced you to actually focus on a few things that you were exceptionally good at and that you could create. And I think for a lot of bakers, it can be quite nerve-wracking when you're starting off as a business. If I think about how I started off, first of all, you're like, where am I getting these customers from? So if I remember, and I'd love to hear your journey, Jenny, but I remember it's basically I was given friends, family, the local care home, anyone that I knew, cakes. And so I could actually get experience and creativity to do what I liked, because I think you have to have an account which has lots and lots of different photos, which shows your skills, right? That you can do different types, and also give you that confidence to go, what is my style? I don't know my style when I start off.
But you know what? When I started out, and I didn't know my style at that point either. So what I did was I followed the cakers that I really liked the styles of. And a lot of the times I would reach out and say, do you mind if I copy this style of cake that you've created, and I will tag you and credit you accordingly. So a lot of the times they will be more than flattered as well. So if somebody asks me direct, do you mind if I copy this cake that you've done? I'd be more than happy to say yes. And just make sure you tag me appropriately. And that's how you sort of collaborate, I guess, in the design sense. And once you make a few of those, you will gain your confidence. You will gain the feedback from clients if they liked it or not. And slowly but surely, you will sort of develop your own style. But I did the same thing. I looked at a few cakers that I loved. And, you can also, based on the photos, you can study it. And if you've got a good eye and you've got a good know-how on how that cake is being built, you can sort of dissect that and have a look. Get your macarons ready and get your piping tips ready, get the colours ready. And you could pretty much create something similar, maybe not exact, but similarly, yes. And I think there is no harm in copying other people's cakes as a beginning until you find your own style. And that's what happened to me organically. Of course, I've been doing this now for nearly 6 years, so I have now defined my style. But that style I would like to impart with you was not a conscious thing for me. I never said, right, this is the design strategy and my 5-year plan of how my cakes are going to evolve. No, that all came organically based on what time I had, what I was capable to make in-house for decorations, of flowers, even the flowers, right? So I've got my set type of flowers and the colours. It took a while to find for my florist, and were they consistent enough that I could use them every week on week. I mastered my macarons and my meringues pretty much early on, and I use them consistently throughout all of my cake designs, whether it be a dinosaur cake or my little pretty and pink cakes. You'll always see macarons on there. It's a signature look that I have created now.
Can I just jump in and talk about macarons? Because I think you're the single biggest reason why I went into making macarons, because Jenne puts these on the cakes, and I saw a lot of other cake artists doing that. I'm like, I need to learn how to make macarons. What a baker's nemesis are macarons.
I know.
It took me 6 months to master macarons.
Oh, God. And how are you now that you've put in that effort to learn? It is the most finicky, very signature French cookie to make. I have thrown away endless batches. I can name you how many batches I've thrown away. Little did it was only from frustration rather than the fact that you could actually eat them and it'd be equally as yummy, even though they're deformed. But yes, that for me also came by surprise. I never knew that macarons would become my signature go-to decoration until I went home with my husband. My husband is French, and we went to his little hometown in Aube, which is in the northeast of France, a little village. And I was like, you know what? This time I'm in France. I've got the little kids here. I'm going to leave you and the mother-in-law, and I'm going to take the speed train from Aube to Paris, and I'm going to enroll myself in an English-speaking macaron class. And that was the time when I was still sleep-deprived, and I was like, oh, my God, this is too much. I wanted my own little getaway. So I had romanticized this whole trip in my head. And my husband that morning went to the local bakery that he goes to go and get his croissants for the family. And he came back and he told me, next week, I got you a one-on-one macaron class with the baker at the local bakery here in the French village. And he speaks English, so you'll be fine. And I went, half of me was like, oh, my gosh, that's amazing. But the other half of me was like, what? You've sabotaged my trip, romantic trip to Paris by myself? Fine, so I'll do this class. It wasn't even a class. He was a single one-man show baker in this tiny little bakery. And there was hardly enough space for both him and I to even walk past each other in this little corridor. And I sat there with my little pen and paper and I wrote down everything he was doing because I knew how hard it was to make these macarons. And if I was going to take anything away from that French trip, it was this recipe and this know-how. So grateful to this baker in the village. He took his time and showed me how to make the macarons. And I brought that back with me in terms of the skill set. I had to adjust it to fit a domestic oven in Australian climate, but I figured it out eventually, and that's why I can amply use my macarons. They're very expensive here in Australia, so those bakers who haven't been able to master it, they would have to buy them, outsource it, and put them on. But it is a very expensive ingredient and little quickie to add on to the cakes. So
it's so interesting, isn't it? It's just one ingredient. It's not even, 10-15% of the cake here, let's be honest.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask. You know you're about to go bake a cake, right? A really nice tall cake with some beautiful decorations on top, maybe some dried blooms, lovely toppers. What are you going to box that in when you give it to the customer? Please don't tell me you're going to have to put some extenders on and staple it to a standard box and then wrap the thing in plastic and give that to somebody, hoping for the best. I have a better idea. Why don't you look at Alba tall cake boxes? 14 or 20 inches tall, they're gorgeous and strong. You can put them together in just a minute. Just amazing. You'll find them a game changer as a baker. Check them out, www.alba.shop. All right, let's get back to the show.
There's a lot of complicated aspects to when you set up a business to begin with. And while you had an illustrious corporate career where you learned many things, beyond the marketing aspect, were you able to apply anything else when you were setting up your business, whether that's financials, just setting up the efficiency of like stock management or ordering what you need and managing that kind of expectations, time management, and how that differed from your day job to what you did on your own. Did you have much guidance there, or was it all trial and error?
So I laugh when I look back at what I used to do in this corporate setting. I used to be in charge of the supply chain management of the iron ore coming down from the mines on the train onto the stockpile at the port, and then booking the ships so they arrive all in time and the right product is there. It was just-in-time management. We had constant discussions of supply chain capacities, throughput issues, bottlenecks, all this concept of big business. I was able to immediately apply to a little small home business where I had fridge capacity, I had oven capacities, I had time capacity. It was in my mindset already. I had to fit as much as I could in my mixer. So I had all these test quantities to see, is it one batch, is it 1.1 batch, is it 1.3 batch that will fit into my KitchenAid mixer. I only had one back then. So I filled everything to the brim. I didn't want to lose the capacity in one batch of my batter or buttercream. Then the next stage from the mixer was how many tins could I fit into my oven. I had a 90 centimetre domestic oven and I would only bake. I was so pedantic with quality, I would only bake in the middle batch. So even though you had two trays, I would only put one tray in at a time, and I had to figure out how many tins could I squeeze in there to make sure that the quality was consistent. And the way that I bake is I bake layer by layer. I don't bake a big layer and then torch the cake. So for me, that capacity, so every time I closed that oven door, I knew how much cake revenue was in there. So the kitchen stand mixer, the oven tins and the oven mixer, oven capacity. Then there was the fridge capacity. So I ended up getting 4 fridges in the house. One was for the home fridge, which that was all we used in the house. And the other 3 were my cake supplies and my cake storing fridges. Then you have to think about time. How much in advance can you make your cakes so they stay fresh enough for the clients to come and pick up? So fortunately, I do everything on a weekly basis. So I bake everything to order. I don't have capacity to store or freeze things. So for me, I had to figure out the fridge capacity as well. So coming from a business background where I was managing already all this from a big business perspective, I was able to really economize and make a very efficiently run business within the time constraints. I also minimized the wastage big time. I really don't like wasting any product. So that's also why I bake things layer by layer, so I don't have to have any cutoffs. You know, there's a lot of processes. If I really sit down and write it all down, I think I'll surprise myself as to how much I have brought on from my previous career into a small business like this to make it, one, efficient, profitable, and with minimal waste.
So did you nail the pricing off the bat as well on how you were pricing your products and your cakes?
Yes. So the pricing is something that I will also discuss because I think it's very important for people in the industry, especially small bakers or home bakers like myself that are starting out. For me, I did a sort of a two-way approach. First of all, you have to have a really clear spreadsheet of your costings. So whether you buy your sugar or your flour from your local grocery or wholesale, it makes a difference as to the end minimum price that you must cover. So you have to be smart enough to do all of your costings item by item, how much sugar you buy, how much you actually use, and how much batch will come out of that one batch. So every batch you make, you should know how much cost that is, right? So you have a baseline. That has a minimum base. And then I also looked at the bakers that I wanted to become. So at that time, when I first started out, I didn't know what kind of baker I'd be, but I knew I wanted to reach a certain caliber, a certain market. I don't bake for every person in this industry, the local market here. I wanted to be a high-end baker who charged a premium for the design and the time. So I based it off on someone who I thought I wanted to sort of reach. So then I was able to get their pricing as a guide, and I sort of based it similar to that baker's sort of pricing structure, I guess. So I started sort of blindly, but at least I had an idea of what my competitors were baking and what I wanted to reach eventually. Having said that, I do review my pricing every year based on a lot of factors. And for me now, I feel like I'm in a pretty sweet spot where I feel like I am getting nicely sort of paid for what I produce. So if you have the confidence, eventually your confidence will come from all the reviews and all the feedback and the repeat clients that you get. But you should review your pricing year on year based on your skill set, cost of ingredients, and COVID has hit so many people around the world with supply costs and increase in margin, in butter and eggs, so forth. So you need to reflect that accurately, because then you're the only one who will suffer from the increases if you don't.
And Jenny, did you factor in your time as well into that?
Yeah, so this is very tricky, isn't it, when you've got your own business. I'm a sole trader here, so my time is really, to be honest, unaccounted for if I really think about how much time I think about putting into my business. It's not a 9 to 5 business work hour. It's around the clock work hour with many other businesses who are sole traders or you're starting out. But it is very important to know how much hours you actually are standing in the kitchen making that batter or the cake. You should have an idea and you should factor that in, whether it be, I don't know, $30 an hour to $50 an hour, what you think you'd be happy getting paid, you should factor that in. So that is, the time is, if I really factored everything in, I don't think anyone would be able to afford my cake. So think back, and you have to think back and be reasonable as well, but you should factor it in because it's such a critical point. I think if you undercharge in any respect, you are not doing yourself any good in an industry where you want to sustain longevity in. So, yeah, it's really tricky because at the beginning you want to bake for everybody or every order that comes in, but you'll soon find out that you're not there to bake for everybody. You want to find your clientele that's going to appreciate your work and your time. And if they don't, then they can find another baker. But to say that, yeah, it's hard. I agree.
And how do you balance that? As a baker, there's so many different elements that you've got to do, right? And sometimes things just go wrong, like a child's sick or something happens, or you have a complete baking disaster. It does happen to people who are very experienced in baking. Have you taken on too much at any time?
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you do when something goes wrong?
Yeah, I've hit this wall a few times, Rachel. Yeah, I'm like a one-man show here, one-woman show in the home life as well. So if I'm sick or something's happened to me, everything stops. It is really difficult to find those boundaries when you want to invest all of your time into your business, because it's one of those things. When you start something and it's your own passion or it's your own business, you want to put everything in it, and that's a really good point to start, I guess. But at the same time, you need to work your boundaries with your personal time as well as your business time. So for me, every time I hit that capacity, I know that I've hit it because I'm either really exhausted or I feel like, oh my goodness, why am I doing this sort of moment? There's only two things you can do. One is if you have reached that capacity in terms of your time, your space, your storage space, and everything else, and you are consistently knocking back on orders because you don't have the ability to take on more orders, there's two things you can do. So one is increase your price at that point and naturally fall away some of the clients that can't afford your time and your cakes, because you're basically running at a capacity. So that means you don't have to make more to earn more money. You can actually charge more and make the same amount of cakes. So that's one way. Or you expand, and you can expand by outsourcing or getting help. So for me, it came to a point where I realized I think I could do with a few hours of help, whether it be cleaning up or helping me prep. So I started, I think somebody actually came and knocked on my door and said, here, I would love to work for you. And I was like, what? That's just amazing. So I gave the girl a shot, and it worked out amazing. She was also a pastry student who was looking for part-time jobs here and there. So it's really flexible. And I was like, wow, having someone on for a couple of hours a week actually expanded my capacity without me knowing. And then I was able to sell a few more cakes to pay for that person to come and help me. And then I realized, my goodness, your capacity increases maybe double if you hire someone. So I went to the stage of hiring help, assistant, and that has worked out beautifully for me. And now I feel like I've got a really nice balance of my time, my capacity with help. And until I add on another kitchen or another oven, I think I'm really happy with this balance at the moment.
It's a great example because take something like washing the dishes, that is a minimum wage or just above minimum wage job. But what you bring to the table is far more than minimum wage, right?
Right.
Your talent, your creativity, your research, your time. So you have to stop doing the minimum wage jobs.
Correct.
To unlock the potential to do greater things.
Yeah.
We've gone through the same journey with our business with Olba. And for the longest time, I was packing all of our e-commerce orders until I was told, why are you doing the $10 an hour job when you should be out there, getting the really big clients that you now have that buy thousands and thousands of boxes from you. Those are the ones, that's where the money is. It's not sitting in the warehouse packing orders.
Yes. I know, but it was another big journey for me to accept help, outside help, to come in-house and teach them, trust them with all of your recipes and trust them with the know-how. especially in a creative job or creative work where all of this that I create is my intellectual property, to hand that over willingly to somebody else who you have to trust that they will keep it in-house or not run off with all that information and start something themselves and things like this. So I know there are, contracts and things around it, but for a home business, mum of three, I'm not in contracts law or anything. I wasn't going to apply anything straight away, but to hand that baby over to somebody else was a big step. But then I look back and I was like, that's what's grown me to where I am today. And if you can outsource things like your bookkeeping, pay them that. It's so much worth your time. Bookkeeping, I outsource my cleaning, I outsource, my assistant comes and helps me 8 hours a week. So that's all worth the investment, because I know that me focusing on a new design or experimenting with a new medium is going to be far more beneficial for my business outcome. Spending that 2 hours to do strategy work of what do I want to sell next, where do I want to pitch myself next. Right now I'm actually in that another moment of a situation where I may need to sort of swivel my business to a different direction due to my sort of personal situation of looking after my parents now. So I'm now thinking, okay, maybe do I create more macarons and do it more like a batch job where I can teach and I don't have to be there to really oversee the end detail. Like, my time is now so precious in a different respect. So yeah, you have to constantly review your work processes and your time and where you add value. And don't be scared to outsource, because the minute you outsource, that means you've got that time back to reinvest. As long as you do reinvest it wisely, you'll see that cost be catered for straight away. So I guess I took those little steps to expand in my own way.
Yeah. But you've pivoted in different ways. You now have a cake school. You've gone off and written a book. You're the first person that we've interviewed on this podcast that has their own book.
Oh, wow.
So
thank you.
You found ways to unlock new things. But I think we should discuss this cake school for a second, because that is not a small task. That's a separate business in itself.
Yes.
So you could look at that and say, well, now what have I done? I've just gone and doubled my output and workload, but I'm still the same person. So why did you do that? How did that come about? What was the intention behind the cake school?
Well, first of all, I'll take you back to how I started even the book part and the online classes. So that was right at the beginning of COVID, when everyone was going into lockdown all around the world. And at that time, I had amassed quite a really decent following on my Instagram. So I knew that I had a really good reach. One of the Perth Collective group contacted me and pitched me this idea, like, let's try and do a online course. Let's come and film it. Then you can reach not only your Perth clientele, but everyone around the world and state. So I was like, why not? I had nothing to lose, because I function as a sort of, a takeaway business. I was still making cakes. People were still celebrating, but in their homes. So the big cakes disappeared, but the smaller ones were being sold. So I was still busy chugging along, but I thought, why not? Let's create this. And together with Nikki from the Perth Collective, she helped me create an amazing 2 courses online, and then also created an ebook on the side. So that was a great little initiative, and I was quite successful in that launch. And it was amazing that there were so many people around the world who wanted to learn what I was doing from a home domestic kitchen. So I was really flattered by all the response. But that was a great indication of turning what I had, my brand and my know-how, into the education space. So, everyone being at home and wanting to learn, but they couldn't leave their homes. This was one way to tap into that. So I was really fortunate enough that someone was interested enough to do that, and was really happy I went down that route. And then with the school, in terms of my classes that I've been promoting lately, I decided to create that because now I've got my own space to do so. This studio, it's like a 35 square meter space, and I've got a nice, really long table that we use to sit around. I have about 7 guests at any one time, and we go through the whole baking process from scratch, and we finish off with a self-decorated cake, which I direct them based on all the tools that we have. So it's a really fun class that we all get to be hands-on and creative. But I just thought that was just the next natural step. Now that the borders have opened, people can come back to being business as usual. I just love the fact that I'm able to now meet my clients or my guests and not be within the four walls baking away, listening to my music and podcasts all day. So I was really happy to have that sort of opening of my brand and my classes. So, yeah, that's how it started.
Did you find the teaching bit natural to be up in front of an audience? Any nerves, or self-doubt?
Initially I was, because I was like, I don't know, how am I going to start this class? I was really much, there was no script. I had to do it all by my own initiative. But I love people. I used to be in corporate, and I used to love the people interaction, which I really missed, I think, when I stepped away from it. I didn't think I'd really miss it as much as I did. So there was a long period of my life with the children and the four walls. And so I've always been a people person, and I love being the energy that I bring, and vice versa is what I sort of love being around. So for me, the speaking part comes naturally because I'm actually doing what I love, and there's no script for this. I'm just telling you as it is, or how you have to make a cake from scratch in your home kitchen. And yeah, they finally get to meet the baker. So that's always fun.
I'm sure if Rachel was a bit closer, she'd be like popping in.
Oh my goodness.
Giving you an online class,
I'd
like
totally
a FaceTime class or something. Yeah, and so I guess you're no longer in Singapore now, so you're back in the UK, are you?
Yeah, we're back in the UK. So, but I do remember cake courses being instrumental. I did a few in London, Umbrella Ice and Biscuits, and I did a chocolate course, and I just loved learning from other people. And I think there's also the crowd of people that you go in with into a class, and you can just learn something very fast in those environments that take a long time to learn on your own.
Yes, of course.
So, I mean, there's a balance. I spent a lot of time looking at YouTube and Pinterest, but there's something very special and unique, especially in a business such as where you are on your own a lot as a baker. It is quite isolating. It is quite lonely. And, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to start this podcast, because we wanted to help create that community and share stories and share struggles and share inspiration for people who are sat at home baking. And also I think you can get that when you go into a class. So it's a wonderful journey that you've been on, that you've had these really dark moments that actually what's come out of them is something really beautiful. It's blossomed into, but at the time it would be really hard. It's probably, when you quit your job and you go into motherhood and you're on your own and you find an outlet. Like, I've made a cake today. I've done something. I've achieved something.
Yeah. I mean, I look back, and if you ask me at any of those points, in my life, like advice on how to do it, I'd be looking at you blank face saying, I don't know how to do this either. I'm just sort of doing what I can, I guess. But, there are times when I have gone outside to learn myself, especially around like the social media strategies and things, because at that time it was all new for everyone. So we were all learning together. So I did take a course in things like a social media one-on-one class about Instagram, just to know what hashtags meant and what kind of hashtags you should be doing. And now you can pay for consultants to come and help you with that now. But at that time, pretty much did it all by myself. And 5 years ago, I think Instagram is a very different space to where it was. And I was very lucky to start when I did, because it's much harder to get the traction these days by yourself organically. So I sort of putting it to the fact that I started my page much earlier, like, even 6 years ago was early on in Instagram. And so the traction that I got in the early years is what set me up for today. So don't be sort of fooled by like the big numbers now of Instagram. I think you can use it to a certain extent, but don't use it as the only tool for you to market your business. There are so many other ways to market your business, and because the numbers are there, a lot of people look at that and say, oh, wow, you know, you've got an amazing following. But at the end of the day, I know who my clientele are, and for me to make my revenue and my business work, I rely on still the interaction and the word of mouth and making sure your quality product is consistent. All that thing is still applies. It's not just what's on show.
Sound advice, right? More followers does not mean more revenue.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's it. And also, you know, someone that's liking me from South America is never going to come and buy my cake. So, you know, focus on your local market, you know. So I've always known that from the beginning. And so even with my hashtags, I don't bother with the whole generic, you know, international ones. I focus, if you look at what I hashtag, it's pretty much Perth cake designer. And that's about, you know, or because I know anyone looking for a cake in Perth will be Googling that or searching that. So make sure that you know who your market is first and cater to them, and then the rest will come organically. So
brilliant advice. Honestly, it's refreshing. It's simple advice, but it's common sense. But I just think, you know, so many people get lost in the weeds of all this that they don't stop to realize. And it sometimes takes somebody who's far further down the road than you are to tell you it actually is not a big deal. You just need to focus on some core things, right, to make sure it works. Listen, Jenne, I know we've probably run out of time here. Obviously, we could continue this conversation on and on, it's just been so nice to chat. We'd like to wrap up this podcast with a few quick fire questions. First thing that comes to mind. You know, you don't need to explain it or anything. We've just got 4 questions for you. So I'm going to start with the first one. Really simple. American buttercream or Swiss meringue buttercream?
Oh, that one's easy.
All right.
Swiss meringue.
All right.
One aspect of baking you won't compromise on?
The final touch. Actually, not so much the final touch, it's the stacking. Like, I am an eye for a perfectly stacked cake that's level. So if you don't get that foundation right, there's no amount of flowers and pretty decorations that can cover that up. So get your foundation right.
That's brilliant. Okay, so next question. Apart from your own ebook, a baking book from your bookshelf?
Oh, well, there's one right out here right now. It's a French patisserie book. This is a beautiful pink book. My French au pair bought it for me when we had an au pair for a little while. It's a French patisserie book from Christophe Felder, Mastering the Fundamentals of French Pastry. And there are pictures every step of the way, all in English. And this is just a Bible for anything, all the French bakery, patisserie items and sauces and everything.
Amazing.
This is what this is amazing, this book. So I learnt my cannelés from here. Any go-to, sort of sauces or the creme pâtissière and yeah, everything's in here. It's an amazing book. I just love looking and reading at it. I haven't made everything in here yet, but that's
there's several hundred pages there. I mean, I'd be surprised if
there's several hundred Bible.
Brilliant. All right, last question, Rachel.
All right, who would you want to make your next birthday cake?
Oh wow, that's a really good question. You know what? As a baker, and I know you would appreciate, nobody bakes for you anymore. So, to be honest, I don't bake my own cakes. I go and buy a cake from the shop, but I go and buy the cake that my mum used to buy me when I was a kid. So it's almost got a bit of a nostalgia. It's got this green marzipan on top. It's like the princess cake from Miss Maud's, but I would never make it myself, and it's like store-bought, but it's basically the cake I grew up eating because my mum didn't bake, And that was a cake that just reminds me of my childhood. So that's the one.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Oh, I love it.
What a great answer. That's just lovely, Jenny. Listen, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me.
All the way from Australia, no less. I mean, we are on the opposite sides of the planet right now, but it's just really nice to have you on and share your stories.
Thank you.
With the beautiful backdrop of cake stands that you have as well behind you. It's just been really, really nice. I know, Rachel, for you, this has probably been very special.
Yeah, it's lovely, Jenny. And it's nice just to, hear your story and just, we all see the beautiful cakes on Instagram, but, it's good to see beneath those layers and gorgeous pictures and see what the reality is of building a business like this. And
thank you.
And I think our listeners will love tuning in and hearing all about you. So it's been a real honor, and hopefully next time we can do it in person, and I'd love to come to one of your classes.
Yes, for sure. You're always welcome here. So fly over for one.
Thank you so much. I would love it. Appreciate it, Jenny. Take care. All the best.
See you. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Well, Rachel, I think you've just interviewed one of your baking idols.
What an absolute honour to sit down and talk to Jenne from Posh Little Cakes. She inspired me so much when I started getting into baking, or even thinking about baking and cakes and cake design.
I remember. I think I even remember that day where you found her Instagram and you just said, "Look at this. This is something else." You weren't baking anything like that.
No, it was a real aspiration of mine to get to a level that Jenne was doing on her cakes. So it was just wonderful to actually sit down and have a chat with her today and hear about her journey and also the struggle along with her journey, and every struggle, how that's blossomed into something amazing.
It's quite special too, because you and her have so much in common. For the listeners out there, I mean, we are talking the same hospital our children were born in, with the same doctor who delivered both. I mean, this is like insanely interesting with their Singapore history, but that's kind of Singapore in some ways it's not. But anyway, the whole thing about giving up on that career to do something else when that career can be so strong and powerful, and just taking off by being there. I think, you two have both been through a lot of similar challenges. So that's why I found it quite special to hear her story.
Yeah, it was very special. And I just love that her journey is constantly changing as well. So she's also really open to looking at what's working for a business and how to take those next steps as well. I mean, wonderful story hearing about her cake school, her ebook, and all those online courses, so she can actually share back her knowledge and audiences across the world.
Beautiful stuff. Jenne, thank you so much. Posh Little Cakes. Go check her out on Instagram. She's got hundreds of thousands of followers. Some amazing cakes that she's been doing. Her design is just very consistent, very elegant, and we love seeing her content. So thanks, Jenne.
Thank you, Jenne.
And that wraps up episode 8 of season 1 of My Baking Journey. That's the end of season 1. I can't believe it. But season 2 will be here in 2023. Don't you worry. So do please rate us, leave us a review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or follow on Spotify. And that way, when season 2 comes out, you'll get notified. You won't miss a thing. So we hope you enjoyed it all. And just a final reminder, this podcast is brought to you by Alba. We are the packaging company that makes dessert packaging for bakers, designed by a baker. Thank you so much, everyone. Talk to you soon.